It's time for Waking Up with Wesley. Today's forecast and weather-why discussion with WLOX First Alert Weather's senior meteorologist, Wesley Williams.
Hello there, South Mississippi, and thank you for waking up with Wesley. I'm Senior Meteorologist Wesley Williams. Happy Mardi Gras. We made it to the day before Mardi Gras, and we are expecting to see some pretty nice parade weather for today. So that's what the focus of the video will eventually get to, will be that parade planner. But speaking of parades, did y'all go to any this past weekend? We had some really nice weather, although it was a close call, because there was actually some severe weather across the region. And I do want to start off just taking a look at just how close of a call that was. This map shows over the last 48 hours, there was actually some storm damage reported in Pearl River County. That's a look at that report there that we did mention this past weekend during our weather coverage. There were also some tornado reports from near Macomb up toward Laurel. So again, very close call with tornado reported if we do a measuring tool. You know, a tornado touched down less than 100 miles away from Biloxi basically, and that was on the same night that we had a parade with thousands of people in the area, and there was a tornado on the ground later overnight after the parade was over and only around 100 miles away. You zoom this map out and you can really get a sense of just how lucky the Mississippi coast was, because that storm line was getting going, moving east from Texas to Louisiana. But then once it became the overnight hours, a lot of the intensity managed to decrease. So the storms were less severe, and when they rolled into Mississippi's coast, we didn't see nearly as many reports as Louisiana, Texas. And then eventually, when the sun came back up on Sunday, the storm line became more intense, and that's where you got that to pick back up over the Florida Panhandle. But during the overnight hours was when we saw some of the lowest intensity of those storms. So again, for the Mississippi coast, we were kind of spared from the worst of it, but more than 100 reports, more than 150 reports of things like thunderstorm wind damage, tornadoes, and even flash flooding and hail across parts of the region. And fortunately, our coast didn't really get to see a whole lot of that. As we take a look at this recap First Alert radar view, you can see how things progressed eastward overnight, pretty much right like the forecast called for. We saw those storms after midnight and before sunrise on Sunday. And then once we went to sunrise Sunday, most of the rain was gone. There's the storm line picking back up over the Florida coast. But like I mentioned in my last update here on Waking Up with Wesley on Friday, there was the backside of the system that tried to put in some clouds, some light rain showers. We had some sun on the coast, fortunately, for the past parade, but we did get some clouds in Stone County and some little light sprinkles that moved into parts of our area at times on Sunday. Here's a more zoomed in view. Before we get to the current information, this is the last recap we're going to look at. And you can see, again, on Saturday night, that's when the storm line moved in. Severe thunderstorm warnings in Pearl River, Hancock, and western Harrison County just after midnight. But fortunately, we saw the storm line decrease in intensity, and so we didn't really see any more of those warnings as it moved farther off to the east. And that, again, that's because there was not a lot of fuel for those thunderstorms since it was overnight and the temperatures were dropping. But then once the sun came back out, that's when the storms began to become more intense. So when you move a little bit more to the east, you can see just how much more intense they were around Tallahassee, because they're getting more sunlight, which heats the ground up more and produces more fuel for the thunderstorms. Even though we did manage to see, like I said, some clouds, some spotty light showers, spotty rain sprinkles rather, Sunday afternoon in some parts of the area. All right, so that's the recap part of the video. We did the past, now let's get to the present. What's going on Monday morning? Well, we do find some clouds on satellite, but no rain. So this is kind of one of those days when you look out the window and you're like, man, all those clouds, it's gonna rain today. But no, I think there's actually some details that would suggest otherwise, because remember, the rain and storms that we had over the weekend were along with a cool front. And now that front is positioned over Florida. So that means that everything that is ahead of that front, if we move the map like this, everything that's ahead of the front, that's where all the moisture is for the rain chances. That's out by the Bahamas this morning. So everything that's behind that front, that's where the air has turned drier. And so we don't really have as much rain back here. If anything, it's just dry. Sure, enough moisture for some clouds, but not enough for any raindrops. And even the clouds that we see this morning, it looks like they should be able to clear later today, which is really what you want to hear for Mardi Gras festivities heading into later Monday. And like I just said, no rain, so our parade's looking nice and dry. Temperatures are above normal. And eventually later this week, we're going to introduce some decent amounts of humidity to the mix before a cool front could get here this weekend. There's a look out the window on Monday morning. You can see it's basically overcast over Gulfport this morning, and that view of the Mississippi coast. Temperatures came down a little bit. Why is it cooler this morning? Well, like I said, we had a cool front that moved into the area yesterday morning. So over the last 24 hours, we've seen a slight drop in the temperature. And most areas this morning are waking up in the 50s instead of yesterday morning when you woke up in the 60s. This cool down will likely continue this afternoon, because yesterday the high temperature made it to the middle 70s. But today the high temperature will only be able to make it into the middle 60s toward lower 70s. So somewhere in there will be where we find a high temperature. There's going to be a range across the area. But all in all, a pretty nice day, and still technically not as cool as it usually is in middle February. Now, let's get to the parade planner. One of the ones that we're going to focus on is going to be the Mystic Crew of the Seahorse, which rolls this evening during the 5 o'clock hour in Bay St. Louis. When that parade begins to roll, we're looking at temperatures dropping a little bit into the lower 60s heading into Monday evening. So it is going to get a little bit cooler for you later this evening compared to the afternoon. The afternoon, we're actually in Bay St. Louis. We're looking at temperatures not too far from 70 at times. And there are expected to be some pre-parade festivities in Bay St. Louis on Monday afternoon. And we're looking at the sky becoming sunnier and temperatures, like I said, not too far from 70 at times. So, but don't expect it to stay that mild in the evening. Even though you might be around almost 70 in the afternoon, you are going to see that drop in the evening. Speaking of this evening, we can take a look at the planner from this evening into Monday night. And I do want to give you a first alert that there will possibly be a round of fog developing late Monday night into Tuesday morning. That could impact travel plans for Mardi Gras Day in the morning. And I know that there are going to be some people traveling. You would think, okay, well, the kids are out of school, maybe the roads are going to be more empty, and maybe you might be right about that, but there's going to be people who are setting up and preparing for parades. So if you are trying to drive a parade float down the interstate, for example, you might be encountering some thick fog clouds at times on Tuesday morning. And of course, if you're tuning into Good Morning Mississippi tomorrow, we'll be giving you the latest updates on visibility and taking a look at the latest visual confirmation of fog if we see it. But I just wanted to give you that early heads up that you may need to allow extra travel time in the morning tomorrow. We expect fog to clear away from us around 8 or 9 o'clock Tuesday morning. So it's not going to be the whole morning, but it is going to be the first part of the day. We'll deal with that. And we could see a mix of sun and clouds tomorrow. Temperatures in the afternoon will be around 70, like this afternoon, which is great news for the Gulf Coast Carnival Association, which is rolling in Biloxi around 1 p.m. on that Tuesday. And we're looking at a 0% chance for rain, exactly what you want to see on Mardi Gras Day. Of course, there are other parades and other Mardi Gras festivities going on. This is not an all-inclusive list, but I did want to focus on those two parades in this particular update. If you want the full list of parades, you can simply head to gulfcoastweekend.com and you'll find all of the information you need there. But as far as GCCA is concerned, you can see, again, very nice conditions. And of course, you'll be able to watch that parade in a live broadcast on WLOX. So be sure to look forward to seeing that on Tuesday. And again, very nice conditions. As far as temperatures are concerned this week, once we get beyond Mardi Gras season and go to the Lenten season, it's actually going to stay above normal. If anything, temperatures might actually go up a little bit as we go from Tuesday to Ash Wednesday. We're looking at temperatures in the middle 70s, and then Ash Wednesday to Thursday, temperatures not too far from 80 degrees on the coast. I think we will find some lower 80s inland around Thursday or Friday. And then we got to Saturday and a cool front is coming in. That could help us to see a drop in temperature around Sunday into early next week. It's not just going to be an uptick in temperature, but like I hinted at earlier, maybe some humidity as well take a look at that in a moment. But let's dive into the details on these temperature numbers. Are we forecasting record high temperatures? Not necessarily, but it could be close. Notice the separation. Today we're forecasting 70. In these forecasts, when I verify my temperatures, I verify them at the Gulfport Airport because it's where they keep the climate records and where the official high will be recorded today. Are we going to hit 70 at the Gulfport Airport today? That's what I think for a high. That's going to be 13 away from the record. So we're not worried about a record high today. Tomorrow, we're only 8 away from the record high. On Wednesday, we're only 5 degrees away from the record high. And then on Thursday, we're within 5 degrees of the record high temperature. We're forecasting 77. The record high is 80, and that was actually set back in 2017. And they've been keeping weather records in the Gulfport Biloxi area since the 1890s. So a long amount of, what is Thursday's date? Let's see, the 19th. So a long amount of February 19th to compare to, and that's the warmest one. Out of the hundreds of February 19th, the warmest one was 80, and that was 2017. It will be just a few degrees away from that record high. Now, of course, again, 77, that's it, specifically in the Gulfport Biloxi area, but there's plenty of other spots, especially inland, where I think it's going to be hotter or warmer. So this looks at the temperature on the coast, which those are the 4 numbers you were just looking at, versus the temperatures inland, and that shows you a little bit more detail there. So today, we're going to be around 70 in general. Tomorrow, we're looking at lower 70s. Wednesday, we're looking at middle to upper 70s for highs. And then on Thursday, we're going to be seeing upper 70s and lower 80s. So, you know, compared to today, comparing Monday to Thursday, Thursday is going to be basically 10 degrees warmer than today across our area. And the temperature just half the story because we're going to see an influx of humidity as well. Not so much on Monday and Tuesday. You'll start to notice it a little bit on Wednesday, and then you'll definitely start to notice it on Thursday and Friday and parts of Saturday. When you have warmth combined with humidity, you can get heat index, and we might have to start talking about that as well. I would not be shocked to see some parts of South Mississippi on Thursday and Friday with a heat index approaching the middle 80s. So it's going to feel like it's the middle 80s in February in South Mississippi. Unusually warm and, like I said, possibly near record. Because we're going to see several days in a row with wind from the Gulf starting Wednesday rather, this will eventually lead to enough moisture that we could see some increasing rain chances. So that's why your 7-day forecast shows that increase in rain chance. Not so much today and tomorrow, but eventually once we get to Ash Wednesday, 20%, then Thursday, 20%, and Friday and Saturday, 30% until that cool front possibly arrives on Saturday. If we see the cool front, then that's how we can get the temperatures to drop from Saturday's 70s to Sunday's 60s. And if you look beyond the 7-day into the 10-day forecast, there's going to be a multi-day stretch of a little bitty cool snap for you from Sunday into early next week. We can take a look at that here and see, again on the coast, drop into 60s on Sunday, lower 60s Monday, middle 60s next Tuesday, and then we're back at it for 70s. For inland areas, same thing, almost 80 on Saturday, 60s on Sunday, lower 60s on Monday, more 60s on Tuesday, then back at it with 70s next Wednesday. Coldest part of the whole next 10 days looks like it could be next Tuesday morning. Places like Wiggins could drop to 38. Places like Gulfport, Biloxi, Pascagoula could drop to 41. So that's basically what to expect over the next 10 days. Many of the next 10 days appear to be warm, a nice warm stretch here for this week before a cool down for the first part of next week. Well, that'll pretty much do it for this edition of Waking Up with Wesley. I've been Senior Meteorologist Wesley Williams. We'll see you again next time.
Thank you for watching Waking Up with Wesley with WLOX First Alert Weather Senior Meteorologist Wesley Williams.